Introduction to FRIAR Park. Nestled in the rolling countryside of Henley-on-Thames, Oxfordshire, approximately 35 miles west of London, FRIAR Park stands as one of England's most extraordinary Victorian estates. This 62-acre property represents far more than a simple country house with gardens. It embodies a complete fantasy world, meticulously crafted to challenge perception, inspire wonder, and provoke laughter. The estate's uniqueness lies not merely in its scale or architectural grandeur, but in its fundamental conception as a three-dimensional puzzle, a landscape designed to deceive the eye and delight the mind at every turn. The main house itself is a Gothic revival masterpiece, rising dramatically from its landscaped grounds with towers, turrets, and ornate stonework that would seem more at home in a medieval romance than in the English countryside of the late 19th century. Yet the building, impressive as it is, serves primarily as the anchor point for the estate's true marvel: its gardens. These outdoor spaces constitute nothing less than a Victorian theme park avant la lettre, filled with architectural follies, optical illusions, underground grottos, and botanical collections that blur the boundary between natural landscape and theatrical stage set. What distinguishes FRIAR Park from other grand Victorian estates is its deliberate embrace of whimsy and illusion. While contemporaneous gardens often emphasized formal beauty, botanical specimen collection, or picturesque naturalism, FRIAR Park's creator conceived his grounds as a living museum of horticultural styles, architectural periods, and visual trickery. Visitors to the estate encountered not a single unified aesthetic vision, but rather a constantly shifting series of garden rooms, each presenting different historical periods, geographical regions, or fantastical themes. The garden's most celebrated feature remains its alpine rock garden, constructed to resemble the Matterhorn mountain and constituting the largest rock garden ever built in England. This monumental construction utilized thousands of tons of weathered limestone transported from Yorkshire, arranged with such skill that visitors experienced a convincing simulation of mountain terrain, complete with alpine plants growing in carefully prepared microclimates. The rock garden demonstrates the estate's fundamental approach. Nothing is quite what it seems, and behind every apparently natural feature lies elaborate human artifice. Beyond the rock garden, the estate contains Japanese-inspired water gardens, medieval-style courtyards, underground boat tunnels leading to illuminated caves, and dozens of stone inscriptions featuring Latin mottos, philosophical reflections, and puns ranging from clever to groan-inducing. Garden gnomes, hundreds of them, peer from unexpected locations, while carved frogs, monks, and other creatures populate grottos and water features. The overall effect resembles a Victorian funhouse translated into landscape form, a place where serious horticultural achievement and absurdist humor exist in perfect balance. The mysterious quality of FRIAR Park's gardens derives partly from their labyrinthine layout. Paths wind through dense plantings, occasionally opening onto unexpected vistas or architectural surprises. The garden rewards exploration, but resists complete comprehension. Even repeat visitors discover new details, hidden inscriptions, or previously overlooked visual jokes. This quality of inexhaustibility was intentional, reflecting the creator's desire to build an estate that would continue revealing new dimensions over time. The estate's location in Henley-on-Thames, a prosperous Thames Valley town famous for its royal regatta, provided an ideal setting for such an ambitious project. The area's mild climate and proximity to London made it attractive to wealthy Victorian professionals seeking country retreats, while its established horticultural culture meant that skilled gardeners and craftsmen were available for ambitious landscaping projects. The Thames itself flows nearby, and the estate's water features connect to local waterways, integrating the property into its regional landscape while maintaining its character as a self-contained fantasy realm. Today, FRIAR Park remains a private residence, closed to public access except on rare occasions. This inaccessibility has only enhanced its mystique, transforming it into a kind of secret garden known more through photographs, descriptions, and cultural references than through direct experience. The estate's two primary historical periods, its original Victorian creation and its later association with one of popular music's most influential figures, have made it a subject of fascination for both garden historians and music enthusiasts, though these two groups rarely overlap in their interests. The story of FRIAR Park is fundamentally a story about vision, eccentricity, and the enduring power of carefully crafted spaces to inspire and intrigue across generations. It demonstrates how a single individual's imaginative obsessions, given sufficient resources and determination, can create something that transcends its moment of creation, speaking to fundamental human desires for wonder, beauty, and the pleasure of being cleverly fooled. The estate stands as testimony to Victorian confidence, creativity, and the belief that wealth and imagination could literally reshape the world into new and delightful forms. 2. Vision of Sir Frank Crisp. The creative force behind FRIAR Park was Sir Frank Crisp, 1st Baronet, 1843 to 1919. A figure who embodied Victorian England's remarkable capacity for combining professional distinction with passionate eccentricity. Crisp was a highly successful London solicitor, eventually becoming senior partner in one of the capital's most prestigious law firms, yet his true passion lay not in legal briefs, but in horticulture, particularly the cultivation of alpine plants and the creation of elaborate garden schemes that challenged conventional notions of landscape design. Born into comfortable circumstances, Crisp demonstrated from an early age both intellectual brilliance and an irreverent sense of humor that would mark all his later achievements. He qualified as a solicitor at 22 and quickly established himself as an exceptionally capable legal mind, eventually counting among his clients some of Britain's wealthiest and most prominent families. His legal work provided the substantial income necessary for his horticultural pursuits, but Crisp never allowed professional success to define his identity. He viewed his legal career primarily as the means to fund his real interests: plants, gardens, and the creation of elaborate environments that would amuse, puzzle, and inspire. Crisp's personality combined scholarly seriousness with prankster playfulness in equal measure. He was a founding member of the British Alpine Garden Society and authored serious botanical texts, particularly on alpine flora and microscopy. He was considered one of England's leading microscopists. His botanical knowledge was encyclopedic, and he approached plant cultivation with scientific rigor, creating precisely controlled growing conditions for delicate alpine species and maintaining meticulous records of his botanical experiments. Yet this same man filled his gardens with puns carved in stone, installed mechanical surprises and trick fountains, and delighted in creating optical illusions that made visitors question their own perceptions. The concept that guided FRIAR Park's creation was nothing less than a museum of gardens, a single estate that would encompass representative examples of multiple horticultural styles, historical periods, and geographical regions. Rather than adhering to a single aesthetic vision, as was conventional in Victorian garden design, Crisp deliberately created a fragmented, eclectic landscape where visitors might encounter a Japanese water garden, a medieval cloister, an alpine mountain scene, and a Gothic grotto, all within a single afternoon's walk. This approach reflected a characteristically Victorian fascination with collecting, cataloging, and displaying specimens from across the world and throughout history. Crisp's use of humor throughout the estate reveals much about his personality and philosophy. He believed that gardens should engage the mind as well as the senses, and he filled FRIAR Park with puzzles, both visual and intellectual. Stone inscriptions scattered throughout the grounds present Latin mottos, many deliberately punning or double meaning. One famous example reads, "Multum in parvo," much in little, a reference to the compressed geographical and historical scope the estate encompasses. Another inscription advises two great jumps appearing near stones positioned across a stream. Only after jumping does the visitor realize the inscription continues below. Might have saved one. This combination of classical learning and schoolboy humor typifies Crisp's approach. The thematic design of FRIAR Park reflected Crisp's belief that gardens should tell stories and create experiences, not merely display plants. Each area of the estate was conceived as a distinct chapter in a larger narrative about human creativity, natural beauty, and the pleasure of being artfully deceived. The underground caves, for instance, weren't simply cool, damp spaces for growing shade plants. They were imagined as complete fantasy environments, with skeleton displays, glowing artificial berries, and mysterious chambers that visitors accessed by boat, creating an experience that combined botanical education with theatrical entertainment. Crisp's vision also included a strong educational component, despite the estate's playful character. He saw FRIAR Park as a living encyclopedia of horticultural and architectural styles, a place where visitors, and he himself, could study different approaches to garden design as represented in three-dimensional form. The Japanese gardens introduced English visitors to aesthetic principles from East Asia. The Alpine Rock Garden demonstrated how plants from extreme environments could be successfully cultivated in lowland England. The various architectural follies illustrated different historical styles of construction and ornamentation. Perhaps most importantly, Crisp's vision was fundamentally optimistic and generous. He created FRIAR Park not as a private retreat sealed off from the world, but as a place designed to be shared and enjoyed. During his lifetime, he frequently hosted visitors, showing them the garden's secrets with evident delight in their reactions. He published articles about his horticultural techniques, sharing his knowledge freely with other enthusiasts. The estate's many jokes and puzzles were intended not to mock visitors, but to invite them into a playful relationship with the landscape, encouraging them to look closely, think carefully, and laugh at the cleverness of the deceptions. Crisp's personality also manifested in his attention to detail. Every element of FRIAR Park, from major architectural features to the smallest garden ornament, received his personal consideration. He was known to spend hours positioning individual stones in the rock garden to achieve exactly the right visual effect, and he personally selected and placed many of the garden's numerous inscriptions. This obsessive perfectionism, combined with substantial financial resources and an apparent lack of concern for conventional opinions, allowed him to realize his vision with remarkable completeness. The concept of creating a museum of gardens was revolutionary for its time. While Victorian England saw many grand estates and innovative gardens, few attempted to encompass such diverse styles within a single property. Most estate owners chose a unified aesthetic approach, whether it was Capability Brown's naturalistic parks, formal Italian gardens, or arts and crafts movement simplicity. Crisp rejected this notion of aesthetic unity, instead creating what might be called a postmodern landscape avant la lettre, where different styles and periods existed side by side without attempting to resolve into a single coherent vision. This approach to garden design reflected broader Victorian cultural attitudes, encyclopedic ambition, imperial confidence in Britain's ability to appropriate and represent cultures from around the world, fascination with technological capability to reshape nature, and a certain playful relationship to historical styles that saw them as costumes to be worn rather than sacred traditions to be reverently preserved. Yet Crisp's vision transcended mere Victorian bombast through its underlying intelligence, botanical seriousness, and genuine respect for the traditions he was reinterpreting. 3. Acquiring and clearing the land. 1889. The creation of FRIAR Park began in 1889 when Frank Crisp, then 46 years old and at the height of his legal career, purchased a 62-acre site in Henley-on-Thames. The property's history stretched back centuries, The friar in Friar Park refers to medieval monks who once owned land in the area, but Crisp's interest lay not in preserving the past, but in creating something entirely new. His vision required starting with essentially a blank canvas, which meant demolishing most existing structures on the site and unifying what had been several separate parcels of land into a single coherent estate. The land Crisp acquired consisted of multiple plots that had been developed piecemeal over previous decades. Several substantial Victorian houses occupied the site, along with their associated outbuildings, gardens, and boundary walls. These existing structures represented conventional mid-Victorian residential architecture and landscaping. Respectable, comfortable, but utterly ordinary. For Crisp's purposes, they were obstacles to be removed rather than assets to be preserved or incorporated. The decision to demolish houses that were barely 40 or 50 years old might seem wasteful by contemporary standards, but it reflected Victorian confidence in progress and improvement. Old buildings were seen not as heritage to preserve, but as detritus to be cleared away to make room for something better. The demolition process began almost immediately after purchase and continued for several months. Contemporary accounts describe a site cleared of nearly all existing buildings, except for a few structures that Crisp deemed potentially useful. The scale of demolition was substantial. Entire houses reduced to rubble, mature trees felled, established gardens dug up and replanted. This destructive phase was necessary to create the unified landscape Crisp envisioned. The separate plots, each with their own entrances, boundary walls, and independent garden designs, needed to be merged into a single flowing space where visitors could move seamlessly between different garden rooms without encountering the fragmenting effects of previous property boundaries. The cleared land presented both opportunities and challenges. The site offered varied topography, gentle slopes, flat areas, and some steeper banks, which would allow for diverse garden treatments. Existing mature trees on the periphery of the property could be preserved to provide immediate screening and a sense of enclosure. The soil was good Thames Valley loam, suitable for a wide range of plants, though Crisp's ambitious plans for alpine and Japanese gardens would require significant soil modification and drainage work. Perhaps most importantly, the property's scale was large enough to accommodate Crisp's vision of a museum of gardens, without different areas feeling cramped or competing for attention. Unifying the plots into a single estate required more than physical demolition. Crisp needed to establish a clear organizational structure for the grounds, creating a hierarchy of spaces with the house at its center and different garden areas arranged in a circuit that visitors could follow. He worked closely with landscape designers and architects to develop an overall master plan, though this plan remained flexible enough to accommodate evolving ideas as construction proceeded. Victorian garden design often privileged the view from the house, but Crisp was equally concerned with the experience of moving through the gardens on foot, discovering new scenes and surprises around each corner. The cleared site also required substantial civil engineering work before garden construction could begin. Drainage was a primary concern. Many of the water features Crisp envisioned would require sophisticated hydraulic systems to maintain water levels, prevent flooding, and create the illusions of streams and waterfalls. Underground pipes were laid throughout the estate, creating an invisible infrastructure that would support the visible landscape features. This engineering work, though hidden, was essential to the garden's functioning and represented a significant portion of the project's total cost. Crisp's approach to clearing and preparing the site demonstrated the characteristically Victorian belief in technology's ability to reshape nature to human purposes. Where previous generations might have worked with existing topography and natural features, Crisp was prepared to move earth, redirect water, and construct entirely artificial landforms to achieve his desired effects. The massive rock garden that would become Friar Park's most famous feature required excavating and reshaping large portions of the site, creating artificial hills and valleys where none had existed before. This willingness to impose a human vision on the landscape rather than working within natural constraints, characterized Victorian garden making at its most ambitious. The demolition and clearing phase also reflected Crisp's financial resources and willingness to invest heavily in realizing his vision. Demolishing recently built houses, clearing the land, and preparing the site for construction represented a substantial expenditure before any visible progress toward the finished garden had been made. Most people would have attempted to incorporate existing structures or work around established features to reduce costs, but Crisp was prepared to spend freely to create exactly what he wanted. This financial freedom, derived from his successful legal practice, gave him unusual creative liberty. As the site was cleared and prepared, Crisp's imagination could begin finding physical form. The blank canvas he had created through demolition awaited the imposition of his vision. Gothic buildings, alpine mountains, Japanese gardens, underground caves, and all the other elements that would transform this Thames Valley site into one of England's most extraordinary estates. The clearance of the land marked the end of the site's conventional history and the beginning of its transformation into something entirely unique. A landscape that would challenge every visitor's expectations and create an experience unlike anything else in Victorian England. 4. Historical and cultural inspiration. Frank Crisp's vision for Friar Park drew upon an extraordinarily diverse range of historical periods, geographical regions, and cultural traditions. Rather than committing to a single aesthetic approach, he conceived the estate as a compendium of garden and architectural styles, each executed with scholarly accuracy while simultaneously infused with his characteristic playfulness. This eclectic approach reflected Victorian England's position at the center of a global empire and its cultural fascination with collecting, cataloging, and displaying specimens from around the world and throughout history. Medieval influences pervaded the estate, beginning with the Gothic Revival architecture of the main house and extending through various garden features. Crisp had a particular fascination with medieval monastic culture. The estate's name itself referenced the friars who had once owned land in the area, and he incorporated numerous references to monastic life throughout the grounds. Stone carvings of monks appear in unexpected locations. Latin inscriptions evoke the scholarly culture of medieval monasteries, and several garden areas were designed to suggest cloistered courtyards where contemplative religious communities might have walked and prayed. These medieval references weren't strictly archaeological reconstructions, but rather Victorian interpretations of the Middle Ages, filtered through 19th-century Romantic sensibilities that valued the period's perceived spirituality, craftsmanship, and connection to nature. Elizabethan garden design provided another major influence. The Elizabethan period, late 16th century, saw the creation of some of England's most elaborate gardens, characterized by geometric layouts, intricate knot gardens, topiary sculptures, and the integration of classical mythology and symbolism. Crisp incorporated elements of this style into Friar Park, including formal planted areas with geometric beds, statuary representing classical themes, and the use of yew and box hedging carved into architectural shapes. The Elizabethan influence was particularly evident in the garden's fondness for conceits, puzzles, and emblematic meanings. Elizabethan gardens were often designed to be read as well as viewed, with plants, sculptures, and architectural features carrying symbolic significance. Perhaps the most visually striking cultural influence at Friar Park came from Japan. The late Victorian period saw a surge of British interest in Japanese art and design, sparked by increased contact following Japan's opening to Western trade in the 1850s. Japanese aesthetics, particularly in garden design, offered approaches radically different from European traditions. Where Western gardens often emphasized geometric order or picturesque naturalism, Japanese gardens pursued a stylized representation of nature, using carefully positioned rocks, controlled water features, pruned trees, and symbolic elements to create miniature landscapes that suggested vast natural scenes. Crisp incorporated these principles into several areas of Friar Park, including water gardens with carefully positioned stones, arched bridges, and plantings that suggested Japanese aesthetic principles while accommodating the Thames Valley climate. The Japanese influence extended beyond aesthetic borrowing to include specific architectural features. Most notably, Crisp commissioned a replica of the Sacred Bridge of Nikko, one of Japan's most famous structures. This highly ornate wooden bridge, painted in brilliant red and gold, provided a striking focal point in the water gardens and demonstrated Crisp's commitment to accurate reproduction of his cultural inspirations. The bridge wasn't simply a decorative garden feature, but an attempt to transport a specific piece of Japanese cultural heritage to the English countryside, allowing visitors to experience something of Japan's aesthetic traditions without traveling thousands of miles. Alpine regions of Europe provided botanical and aesthetic inspiration for the estate's most famous feature, the enormous rock garden designed to resemble the Matterhorn. Alpine landscapes had captured Victorian imagination for multiple reasons. The development of alpine tourism in the mid-19th century, improvements in mountaineering equipment, and romantic literature celebrating mountain scenery had made the Alps increasingly accessible and popular. Simultaneously, botanists were discovering the remarkable flora adapted to harsh mountain conditions, compact plants with brilliant flowers that had evolved to survive extreme environments. Crisp was passionate about alpine plants and saw the rock garden as both an aesthetic statement and a scientific endeavor, creating conditions where these specialized plants could thrive in lowland England. The rock garden's inspiration went beyond general alpine scenery to reference a specific peak, the Matterhorn, one of the Alps' most iconic mountains. Located on the Swiss-Italian border, the Matterhorn's distinctive pyramidal shape made it instantly recognizable and symbolically powerful. By recreating this famous peak in miniature, Crisp was engaging in a characteristically Victorian act of appropriation and display, taking a natural wonder and reproducing it within a private estate where it could be enjoyed without the difficulty and danger of actual mountain climbing. The Matterhorn replica wasn't intended to fool visitors into thinking they were seeing the actual mountain, but rather to evoke the experience of alpine landscapes while simultaneously demonstrating human ingenuity in reshaping nature. Crisp's architectural references extended beyond gardens to the design of the main house and various garden structures. The Gothic Revival style he employed for the main house drew inspiration from medieval European cathedrals, castles, and civic buildings, but filtered through Victorian sensibilities. Victorian Gothic Revival wasn't simply copying medieval architecture, but reimagining it, often exaggerating decorative elements and creating picturesque silhouettes that would have seemed excessive to actual medieval builders. Crisp and his architect embraced this theatrical approach, creating a building that suggested medieval grandeur while incorporating modern conveniences and expressing Victorian values. Crisp's botanical passion provided perhaps the deepest wellspring of inspiration. He was an exceptionally knowledgeable horticulturist with particular expertise in alpine plants, ferns, and orchids. His scientific background, he was accomplished in microscopy and published scholarly work on botanical subjects, meant that he approached plant cultivation with systematic rigor. The gardens weren't simply decorative, but served as living laboratories where Crisp could experiment with growing conditions, test his horticultural theories, and observe plant behavior. This scientific dimension distinguished Friar Park from purely aesthetic garden projects, giving it an additional layer of intellectual purpose beyond visual impact and entertainment value. The estate's eclectic inspirations also reflected Victorian attitudes toward history and culture. The 19th century saw history increasingly presented as a collection of distinct periods, each with characteristic styles that could be studied, classified, and reproduced. This led to a cultural landscape where Gothic, Renaissance, Classical, and other historical styles coexisted as design options available for contemporary use. Crisp embraced this historicist approach enthusiastically, seeing no contradiction in placing a Japanese bridge near a Gothic grotto or in combining alpine plants with medieval architectural details. For him, these diverse elements formed a coherent whole unified by his personal vision and the overall concept of the estate as a museum of gardens. 5. Gothic Victorian architecture. The architectural heart of Friar Park is its magnificent main house, a virtuoso display of Victorian Gothic revival design that stands as one of the most exuberant examples of the style in England. Designed by architect Robert Clark Edwards in collaboration with Frank Crisp, the house was constructed between 1889 and 1895, emerging as a building that would have seemed fantastical even by Victorian standards, with its profusion of towers, turrets, carved stonework, and deliberate asymmetry creating a silhouette that appears more fairy tale illustration than conventional residence. Robert Clark Edwards was an architect particularly associated with Gothic revival work in the Thames Valley region. His collaboration with Crisp proved ideal because Edwards possessed the technical skill to execute Gothic details convincingly while sharing his client's enthusiasm for picturesque effect over strict archaeological accuracy. The partnership produced a building that demonstrated deep knowledge of Gothic architectural vocabulary, pointed arches, tracery windows, buttresses, gargoyles, and pinnacles, while using these elements in exaggerated and inventive ways that announced the building's Victorian origin. This was Gothic revival at its most confident and theatrical, uninterested in restraint or historical puritanism. The house's design emphasizes vertical drama, with multiple towers rising to different heights and creating a deliberately irregular skyline. This asymmetry was a key principle of Victorian Gothic revival, rejecting classical architecture's emphasis on symmetry and balance in favor of picturesque compositions where buildings appeared to have grown organically over time, with additions and modifications creating visual complexity. The tallest tower at Friar Park rises several stories above the main house, capped with a steep pyramidal roof that references medieval castle architecture. Other turrets emerge unexpectedly from the roofline, creating the impression of a building designed more for visual effect than structural logic. The exterior stonework displays extraordinary richness of ornamentation. Windows are surrounded by elaborate carved frames featuring botanical motifs, grotesque figures, and geometric patterns. Doorways are recessed within multiple layers of carved stone arches, each layer carrying different decorative treatments. Corbels supporting roof overhangs take the form of human figures, animals, and fantastic creatures. Gargoyles project from the roofline, fulfilling their practical function of directing rainwater away from walls while simultaneously adding to the building's medieval character. Every surface that could potentially receive ornament has been carved, creating a visual density that rewards extended observation. The building's ornamentation includes numerous references to the estate's overall themes. Carved stone frogs appear repeatedly, acknowledging Crisp's particular fondness for these creatures. He kept them in the estate's numerous ponds and considered them garden allies for their consumption of insects. Monk figures reference the Friar Park name and medieval monastic culture. Botanical carvings reflect Crisp's horticultural passion, with recognizable plant species rendered in stone. These personalized decorative elements transform the house from generic Gothic pastiche into a unique expression of its creator's personality and interests. The house's windows deserve particular attention as examples of Victorian craftsmanship. Many feature elaborate tracery patterns, the decorative stonework that divides window openings, executed with precision that demonstrates both the architect's design skill and the craftsman's technical ability. The largest windows incorporate stained glass, including some designed specifically for the house with botanical and symbolic imagery. Window shapes vary throughout the building, with pointed Gothic arches predominating but also including rose windows, lancet windows, and oriel windows that project from wall surfaces, adding three-dimensional complexity to the facades. The entrance gates and gatehouses further demonstrate the estate's commitment to Gothic Victorian design. The main gates are substantial wrought iron constructions mounted between stone pillars topped with carved finials. The ironwork itself features intricate scrollwork patterns typical of Victorian metal craftsmanship, creating gates that function as both security features and artistic statements. The gatehouses, small buildings flanking the entrance, are miniature Gothic structures in their own right, with carved stone details, steep roofs, and decorative elements that announce the estate's character before visitors even enter the grounds. Inside, the house continues the Gothic theme, while incorporating modern conveniences and comfortable living spaces. The Great Hall features exposed timber beams in a hammer beam configuration reminiscent of medieval banqueting halls, but with better heating and lighting than any medieval building ever possessed. Fireplaces throughout the house display elaborate stone surrounds carved with heraldic and botanical motifs. Staircases feature substantial newel posts carved with figures and geometric patterns, while the balusters, the vertical supports beneath handrails, demonstrate the turner's craft through complex turned profiles. The flamboyant character of the architecture reflected Crisp's personality and his rejection of Victorian restraint and conventionality. While many of his contemporaries built country houses in more subdued styles, classical, Jacobean, or arts and crafts simplicity, Crisp wanted something dramatic, memorable, and unabashedly theatrical. The house announces its owner's eccentricity and creative ambition before visitors see anything of the gardens. This architectural boldness served practical purposes as well. The house needed to function as the visual anchor for the extensive gardens, holding its own against the landscape's dramatic features rather than being overwhelmed by them. Edwards and Crisp's collaboration also addressed practical considerations despite the design's fantastical character. The house includes service wings, modern plumbing and heating systems, and a rational floor plan that allowed efficient household operation. The Gothic ornamentation, extravagant as it is, doesn't compromise the building's functionality. This balance between aesthetic ambition and practical livability demonstrates Victorian architecture at its most accomplished, creating buildings that satisfied both romantic imagination and contemporary expectations for comfort and convenience. The architectural achievement of FRIAR Park extends beyond the main house to encompass numerous smaller structures throughout the estate. Boathouses, tool sheds, gardeners' cottages, and various follies, all receiving the same attention to Gothic detail and ornamental richness. This consistency of architectural treatment throughout the property creates thematic unity despite the garden's stylistic diversity, ensuring that wherever visitors look, they encounter the Gothic Victorian aesthetic that defines the estate's built environment. 6. The Alpine Rock Garden and Matterhorn Replica. The crowning achievement of FRIAR Park's gardens, and the feature that brought Frank Crisp national recognition in horticultural circles, is the enormous Alpine Rock Garden, designed to evoke Swiss mountain landscapes and featuring a 20-foot replica of the Matterhorn as its dramatic centerpiece. This garden represented the largest rock garden in England at the time of its construction and remains one of the most ambitious examples of Victorian alpine gardening ever attempted. The creation of this extraordinary feature required immense resources, sophisticated horticultural knowledge, and considerable engineering skill, combining scientific plant cultivation with theatrical landscape design. Alpine rock gardens emerged as a distinct garden style in the mid-Victorian period, reflecting multiple cultural currents. The development of alpine mountaineering as a sport, particularly the golden age of alpinism in the 1850s to 1870s, made mountain regions increasingly familiar to educated Britons. Simultaneously, botanists were cataloging the remarkable flora of alpine regions, plants that had evolved extraordinary adaptations to survive in harsh conditions of intense sunlight, cold temperatures, thin soil, and limited moisture. These plants, many producing brilliant flowers disproportionately large for their compact size, became highly desirable to British gardeners. However, growing alpine plants in lowland conditions presented significant challenges, requiring careful attention to drainage, soil composition, and microclimate. Crisp approached the challenge with characteristic ambition. Rather than creating a modest rock garden featuring a few alpine plant species, he envisioned a complete mountain landscape, compressed and miniaturized, but attempting to capture the essential character of alpine regions. The garden would occupy a substantial portion of the estate, covering several acres and incorporating tons of carefully positioned rock, creating artificial valleys, cliffs, and peaks that would provide varied growing conditions for hundreds of alpine plant species. The centerpiece of the rock garden was the Matterhorn replica, an extraordinary construction that represented perhaps the most audacious element of the entire estate. The Matterhorn, with its distinctive pyramidal shape, was one of the Alps' most recognizable peaks and held particular resonance for Victorian climbers. Its first ascent in 1865 had been a triumph marred by tragedy when 4 members of the ascending party died during the descent. Crisp's decision to recreate this specific peak rather than a generic mountain form demonstrates his commitment to specific cultural references rather than abstract landscape effects. Construction of the replica required sophisticated engineering. The structure needed to be tall enough to create dramatic visual impact, approximately 20 feet in height, while remaining stable without steel reinforcement, which would have been considered cheating by Victorian sensibilities demanding natural rockwork. Crisp and his builders achieved this through careful construction techniques, starting with a core of brick and rubble for stability, then facing this core with natural stone arranged to create the illusion of solid rock. The result appeared from a distance to be a natural mountain formation, though close inspection revealed the human engineering behind the effect. The import of materials for the rock garden represented a massive undertaking. Crisp wasn't satisfied with local stone, which wouldn't have provided the weathered, dramatic character he desired. Instead, he arranged for the transportation of thousands of tons of limestone from Yorkshire, selected specifically for its texture, color, and weathering patterns that would evoke alpine landscapes. This stone arrived by rail and then needed to be transported to the site and positioned piece by piece. The largest stones required teams of horses and specialized equipment to move and place. Contemporary accounts describe armies of workers spending months arranging stones under Crisp's personal supervision, adjusting positions repeatedly until achieving exactly the desired effect. The rock garden's design utilized forced perspective to enhance the illusion of scale. Stones were carefully sized and positioned so that smaller rocks appeared in the distant portions of the landscape, while larger stones occupied the foreground, making the garden appear deeper and more expansive than its actual dimensions. Pathways were designed to snake through the rockwork, sometimes disappearing behind stone formations before re-emerging, creating the impression of a landscape too large to take in at a single glance. These visual tricks demonstrated Crisp's understanding of perceptual psychology and his commitment to creating experiences that transcended mere plant display. The botanical component of the rock garden represented serious scientific endeavor. Crisp cultivated hundreds of alpine plant species, many quite rare in English gardens. These plants required precise growing conditions, excellent drainage. Alpine plants typically rot in waterlogged soil. Appropriate soil pH, correct sun exposure, and protection from excessive winter moisture. Crisp addressed these requirements through elaborate preparation, creating specific soil mixtures for different plant groups, positioning rocks to create shade patterns and moisture gradients, and installing drainage systems that prevented water accumulation while ensuring plants received adequate moisture during growing season. The plant collection included species from Alps, Pyrenees, Rockies, and other mountain ranges worldwide. Saxifrages, with their cushion-forming habit and profuse spring flowers, featured prominently. Gentians provided intense blue flowers that epitomized alpine flora. Primulas contributed variety in form and flowering time. Dwarf conifers and alpine willows provided woody structure and year-round interest. Each plant was positioned to display its natural growth habit while creating aesthetic compositions that suggested natural plant communities rather than formal garden arrangements. The rock garden demonstrated Victorian horticulture's ambitious scope and technological confidence. Creating mountain conditions in lowland Thames Valley required fighting against natural climate and soil conditions, but Victorian gardeners believed that with sufficient knowledge, resources, and determination, any plant could be grown anywhere. Crisp's success with alpine plants, he exhibited specimens at Royal Horticultural Society shows and won numerous awards, validated this optimistic philosophy and established him as one of England's leading alpine plant specialists. The garden also served educational purposes, functioning as a living museum of alpine flora where visitors, and Crisp himself, could study plants from multiple mountain ranges without traveling. This encyclopedic approach to plant collection typified Victorian botany, which emphasized comprehensive cataloging and display of natural diversity. The rock garden wasn't just beautiful. It was a scientific instrument, a teaching tool, and a demonstration of human mastery over natural limitations. Winter management of the alpine collection required particular care. Many alpine plants evolved in regions with consistent snow cover protecting them from temperature fluctuations and excessive moisture. Thames Valley winters, with their temperature swings and rain rather than snow, created challenging conditions. Crisp installed glass covers over particularly vulnerable plants, creating miniature greenhouses that protected against moisture while allowing light penetration. These protective structures, while functional, also became ornamental features in their own right, demonstrating how Victorian garden craft integrated aesthetic and practical considerations. The rock garden's influence extended beyond FRIAR Park. Crisp published articles describing his construction techniques and cultivation methods, influencing other gardeners attempting alpine cultivation. The garden became a destination for serious horticulturists who visited to study Crisp's methods and see rare plants growing successfully in apparently unsuitable conditions. This scientific reputation existed alongside the garden's role as entertainment and spectacle, demonstrating how Victorian culture could combine serious inquiry with theatrical presentation without sensing contradiction between these approaches. 7. Underground caves and fantasy chambers. Among FRIAR Park's most extraordinary features are its underground spaces, a network of caves, tunnels, and subterranean chambers that transform garden exploration into an adventure reminiscent of Jules Verne novels. These underground realms represented Victorian engineering at its most extravagant, creating fantastical environments that served simultaneously as growing spaces for shade-loving plants, stages for visual spectacle, and theatrical sets for elaborate jokes and illusions. The underground system demonstrates Frank Crisp's commitment to total environmental control and his belief that gardens should engage visitors' imaginations as thoroughly as their botanical interests. The cave system centered around water features, with tunnels allowing boat access to various chambers. Visitors could embark in small boats from a landing near the main gardens and be propelled, or row themselves, through low-ceilinged passages carved through the rock, emerging into larger chambers illuminated by concealed skylights or artificial lighting. This boat journey created an experience unprecedented in English gardens. something between an amusement park ride and a Gothic novel, combining real horticultural purpose with pure theatrical effect. The tunnels themselves were marvels of construction. Creating underground passages required extensive excavation, followed by careful engineering to ensure structural stability and prevent water infiltration or collapse. The tunnel walls received varied treatments. Some sections featured rough-hewn rock faces, suggesting natural cave formation, while others displayed more finished stonework, acknowledging human construction. The tunnels included periodic openings to the surface, partly for ventilation, but also to create dramatic light effects as boats passed beneath these openings, with sunlight suddenly streaming down to illuminate the water before the boat progressed into darkness again. The chambers varied in size and treatment, each designed to create specific effects and evoke different moods. Some featured elaborate displays of ferns and other shade-loving plants, grown in the cool, humid conditions that made these spaces ideal ferneries. Victorian Britain experienced a fern craze in the mid-19th century, with enthusiasts collecting hundreds of fern species and cultivating them in specialized environments. Crisp's underground chambers provided perfect conditions for delicate fern species that struggled in more exposed locations, transforming necessity, using the underground spaces productively, into aesthetic opportunity. Other chambers focused on visual spectacle rather than plant cultivation. The most famous featured an elaborate skeleton display. Whether actual human remains or reproductions remained unclear even to contemporary visitors, adding to the macabre fascination. The skeleton might be positioned in various poses, sometimes appearing to guard treasure. Other times, simply posed dramatically in niches carved into chamber walls. This Gothic touch reflected Victorian fascination with death symbolism and memento mori traditions. Though characteristically, Crisp treated even this morbid subject with humor, including inscriptions that made puns about mortality. Perhaps the most technologically impressive display involved artificial berries crafted from colored glass that appeared to glow in the darkness. These decorative elements lined portions of the tunnel walls, creating an otherworldly effect as boat passengers drifted past what appeared to be phosphorescent fruit growing in the darkness. The illusion worked through concealed lighting, probably candles or early electric lights hidden behind the glass berries, which were designed to catch and diffuse this light, creating an eerie glow. This display demonstrated Victorian engineering creativity, using available technology to create effects that contemporary visitors found magical and inexplicable. The cave system also housed Crisp's famous gnome collection, one of the largest assemblages of garden gnomes in England. These weren't the mass-produced gnomes familiar from modern garden centers, but rather individually crafted German ceramic figures, imported at considerable expense. German manufacturers, particularly in the Thuringia region, produced elaborate gnome figures in the late 19th century, each hand-painted and given individual character through variations in pose, costume, and facial expression. Crisp displayed hundreds of these figures throughout the caves, positioned in groupings that suggested narrative scenes or simply scattered through the spaces where visitors would discover them unexpectedly. The gnomes served multiple purposes beyond decoration. Their presence in the dark caves created moments of surprise. Visitors' eyes, adjusting to dim lighting, would suddenly register a gnome figure watching from a niche or lurking near a turn in the path. This element of surprise and mild startlement aligned with Crisp's interest in creating gardens that actively engaged visitors rather than offering passive contemplation. The gnomes also added humor to environments that might otherwise have seemed too gothic or oppressive, their whimsical characters lightening the mood and reminding visitors that these elaborate constructions were ultimately exercises in sophisticated play. Perception manipulation was a constant theme in the underground spaces. Crisp installed various optical illusions, including mirrors positioned to create false perspectives, making chambers appear to extend further than they actually did. Water features contributed to these illusions. Still pools positioned at the end of tunnels reflected light in ways that suggested openings or additional passages where none existed. These perceptual tricks demonstrated Crisp's understanding of how human vision interprets spatial information and his delight in exposing the fallibility of these perceptual processes. The underground chamber's acoustics received attention as well. The enclosed spaces created echo effects that Crisp exploited through positioning of dripping water features. Water drops, falling from specific heights into pools below, created rhythmic sounds that echoed through the chambers, adding an auditory dimension to the visual and spatial experience. Visitors describe these sounds as both soothing and slightly uncanny, contributing to the overall atmosphere of entering a fantastical realm removed from everyday reality. Creating and maintaining these underground spaces required considerable engineering expertise and ongoing care. The constant presence of water in enclosed spaces created challenges with humidity, mold, and structural deterioration. Drainage systems needed careful design to prevent flooding while maintaining enough moisture for fern cultivation. Ventilation required attention to prevent stagnant air while avoiding drafts that might damage delicate plants. The engineering solutions, though invisible to casual visitors, represented sophisticated understanding of hydraulics, structural mechanics, and environmental control. The Victorian engineering extravagance evident in FRIAR Park's underground realm reflected broader cultural confidence in technology's ability to reshape nature and create entirely new environments. The tunnels and chambers weren't simply utilizing existing topography, but actively creating three-dimensional space where none had existed, imposing human imagination onto the landscape as thoroughly as if building a house. This willingness to invest resources in features that served no practical purpose beyond entertainment and botanical experimentation demonstrated Victorian wealth, ambition, and the cultural value placed on elaborate leisure environments. 8. Lakes and water illusions. Water features at FRIAR Park transcend typical garden ponds and fountains to become elaborate stage sets for visual illusions and perceptual manipulation. Frank Crisp recognized water's unique properties, its reflectivity, transparency, capacity for movement, and ability to support aquatic plants, and exploited these qualities to create effects that consistently surprised and delighted visitors. The estate's various water features, from multi-tiered artificial pools to the famous walking on water illusion, demonstrate Victorian hydraulic engineering creativity and Crisp's commitment to gardens as experiential entertainment. The estate incorporates multiple lakes and pools arranged at different elevations, connected by streams and cascades that create both visual interest and practical functions. The multi-tiered system allowed Crisp to manage water flow throughout the gardens, ensuring adequate moisture for plant collections while creating varied aquatic habitats for different plant communities. These water features weren't merely aesthetic, but demonstrated Crisp's understanding of plant ecology. He created bog gardens, shallow pools for marginal aquatics, and deeper pools for water lilies, each environment supporting specialized plant collections. The largest lake serves as the estate's primary water feature, covering a substantial area and providing habitat for diverse aquatic life. Crisp stocked the lake with ornamental fish, including goldfish and carp varieties that added movement and color to the water surface. The lake edges received varied treatment. Some areas featured natural-appearing margins with emergent vegetation, while others incorporated stone edging and formal details that announced human design. This combination of naturalistic and architectural treatments characterized the entire estate, which never committed fully to either aesthetic approach, but instead moved freely between them. The most famous water illusion involved stepping stones positioned across a pool in a manner that created the appearance of walking on water. The illusion worked through careful stone placement just beneath the water surface. The stones were large and stable enough to walk on safely, but positioned low enough that they remained invisible beneath the water's reflective surface. From a distance, visitors appeared to stride across the water itself, their feet touching a surface that seemed to be pure liquid. The effect was particularly striking on sunny days, when water surface reflections made the submerged stones completely invisible until someone actually stepped onto them. This walking on water feature later gained additional cultural significance when George Harrison, after acquiring the estate in 1970, referenced it in various contexts. Harrison was filmed walking across these stepping stones, and the feature appeared in discussions of FRIAR Park's influence on his creative work. The illusion's blend of spiritual suggestion, walking on water being associated with religious miracle narratives, and Victorian trickery aligned perfectly with Harrison's interests in Eastern spirituality and playful skepticism toward conventional reality. Crisp's water features included a replica of the sacred bridge of Nikko, one of Japan's most important religious structures. The original bridge, located at the entrance to the Toshogu Shrine Complex in Nikko, Japan, exemplifies Japanese architectural craftsmanship with its curved design, brilliant red lacquer finish, and elaborate carved and painted details. Crisp commissioned a careful reproduction of this bridge, which was constructed and finished according to Japanese traditional techniques, though adapted to Thames Valley weather conditions and available materials. The bridge spanned one of the estate's ornamental pools, providing a functional crossing while serving as sculpture and cultural reference. The Nikko Bridge demonstrates Crisp's approach to cultural appropriation. He wasn't interested in vague suggestions of Japanese aesthetic, but rather in accurate reproduction of specific significant structures. This precision reflected Victorian attitudes toward cultural display. Objects from other cultures were valued partly for their aesthetic qualities, but also as educational tools and markers of cosmopolitan sophistication. Having an accurate replica of the Nikko Bridge allowed Crisp and his visitors to experience something of Japanese architectural tradition without traveling to Japan, while also demonstrating his resources and commitment to accuracy in his cultural references. The estate's water features incorporated various aquatic plant collections, reflecting Crisp's botanical interests. Water lilies, Nymphea species, provided spectacular summer blooms floating on the lake surface, including varieties in white, yellow, pink, and red. The marginal areas supported irises, particularly Japanese iris varieties, Iris insata, that produced large, elaborate flowers in early summer. Bog gardens featured primulas, astilbes, and other moisture-loving plants that created colorful displays in conditions where most garden plants would fail. These plantings weren't merely decorative, but represented serious horticultural collecting and cultivation, with Crisp growing rare varieties and experimenting with cultivation techniques. The hydraulic engineering supporting these water features demonstrated Victorian technological capability. The various pools and lakes required precise water level management to prevent overflow during wet periods while maintaining adequate depth during drought. Crisp installed elaborate pipe networks, overflow mechanisms, and control valves that managed water flow throughout the system. Some water features included recirculating systems, with pumps, likely wind or water-powered in the Victorian period, before widespread electric power availability, moving water from lower to higher elevations to create continuous fountain or cascade effects. Illusions continued throughout the water features beyond the stepping stones. Crisp positioned mirrors near some pools to create false perspectives, making water features appear to extend further than they actually did. He installed glass panels in some pool bottoms, allowing light to penetrate from below and creating unusual illumination effects. Artificial grottos featured pools where careful lighting made depth impossible to judge, leaving visitors uncertain whether they were seeing shallow pools with reflective bottoms or deep water that simply appeared shallow. These perceptual puzzles maintained the estate's theme of reality, proving less straightforward than initial appearances suggested. The sound of water contributed significantly to the garden's atmosphere. Crisp designed cascades and fountains not only for visual effect, but for their acoustic properties, creating varied water sounds throughout the estate. Some features produced gentle trickling, others more dramatic splashing, and still others the musical sounds of water droplets falling from specific heights. These sounds created an aural landscape that changed as visitors moved through the gardens, with water sounds sometimes audible before the features themselves came into view, building anticipation and adding another dimension to the sensory experience. The water features' maintenance required constant attention and considerable expertise. Algae growth needed management to prevent pools from becoming murky and unattractive. Aquatic plant collections required division and replanting on appropriate schedules. Fish populations needed monitoring and feeding. Mechanical systems required inspection and repair. Ice formation during winter posed risks to pools and pipes. The scale of maintenance demanded a substantial staff of gardeners specifically focused on water features, demonstrating the ongoing costs of maintaining Victorian estates at the level Crisp desired. 9. Decline and rescue. The decades following Frank Crisp's death in 1919 brought gradual deterioration to Friar Park as the estate passed through various hands and purposes, none of which could or would maintain the property at the level its creator had established. The decline of great Victorian estates was a common story in early to mid-20th century Britain, as changing economic conditions, social structures, and 2 world wars made the maintenance of elaborate private grounds increasingly difficult. Friar Park's particular vulnerability lay in its elaborate artificiality. Every feature required active maintenance, and without constant care, the estate's carefully constructed illusions collapsed into mere decay. The initial phase of decline occurred relatively gradually. Crisp's widow attempted to maintain the property, but lacked both his personal passion for the gardens and his substantial income from legal work. The estate's maintenance costs were enormous. A large gardening staff was necessary to maintain the plant collections. Water features required constant attention, buildings needed repair, and the various mechanical features, fountains, lighting systems, drainage, demanded ongoing monitoring and maintenance. Without Crisp's driving vision and willingness to invest heavily in the property, standards inevitably slipped. The estate changed hands several times in the 1920s and 1930s, with owners attracted by the property's size and grandeur, but often daunted by the practical challenges of maintaining it. The gardens, in particular, suffered when owners couldn't or wouldn't employ adequate staff. The rock garden, which required specialized knowledge to maintain its alpine plant collections, saw rare specimens die and be replaced by weeds. Water features failed when mechanical systems broke down and weren't repaired. Buildings developed leaks, decorative stonework weathered without maintenance, and the overall impression shifted from magical whimsy to somewhat melancholy decay. World War II accelerated the decline. Many grand estates were requisitioned for military use or institutional purposes during the war years, and Friar Park was no exception. The estate's large buildings and grounds proved useful for wartime purposes, but military occupation rarely benefits historic properties. Gardens received minimal maintenance, as labor and resources were directed toward the war effort. Some features suffered direct damage, while others simply deteriorated from neglect. The post-war period brought no immediate relief. Britain emerged from the war economically exhausted, facing austerity conditions that made the maintenance of elaborate private estates even more challenging. The estate entered perhaps its lowest period when it was acquired by a religious order in the 1950s and operated as a convent school. The conversion to institutional use required modifications that often worked against the estate's original character. Buildings were subdivided to create dormitories and classrooms. Gardens received minimal maintenance beyond basic upkeep of lawns and paths. Many of Crisp's more elaborate features were considered frivolous or even inappropriate for a religious educational institution. The underground caves, filled with gnomes and skeletons, were largely sealed off. The rock garden's plant collections were neglected, with alpine rarities giving way to common weeds and self-sown trees. The Japanese bridge and other exotic features suffered particular neglect during this period. The bridge's elaborate paintwork deteriorated in the English weather, and maintenance staff lacked knowledge of traditional Japanese construction techniques necessary for proper restoration. The water features, which required active management to remain attractive, often became stagnant or were allowed to dry completely. The lakes accumulated sediment, reducing their depth and supporting primarily common native weeds rather than Crisp's carefully chosen ornamental collections. By the late 1960s, FRIAR Park faced an uncertain future. The convent school was struggling financially, and the buildings and grounds had deteriorated to a point where major investment would be necessary for continued viable use. There was serious discussion of demolishing the house and developing the land for residential housing, a fate that had befallen numerous Victorian estates throughout England. The elaborate Gothic architecture, which had seemed so impressive in Crisp's era, was viewed by many in the modernist 1960s as excessive and absurd, lacking the historical significance or architectural quality that might have justified preservation. The risk of demolition was very real. Local planning authorities showed limited enthusiasm for preserving what many considered an architectural curiosity rather than a legitimate historic building. The gardens, by this point so deteriorated that their original character was barely visible, offered little argument for preservation. Without someone willing to invest enormous resources in restoration and ongoing maintenance, the estate seemed likely to be lost. The house demolished, the gardens bulldozed, and the land redeveloped for contemporary purposes that would erase any trace of Crisp's vision. This was the situation in 1970 when George Harrison, then at the height of his fame as a Beatle, first encountered FRIAR Park. The timing was fortunate. Perhaps the last moment when rescue was possible before deterioration became so severe that restoration would be prohibitively expensive even for someone with substantial resources. Harrison's decision to purchase the estate and his subsequent decades-long commitment to its restoration saved FRIAR Park from destruction and initiated a second chapter in its history, as remarkable in its way as the first. The decline and near loss of FRIAR Park represents a broader pattern in British cultural history. The gradual disappearance of Victorian estates and gardens as changing economic and social conditions made their maintenance unsustainable. Many similar properties were lost entirely, demolished or radically altered beyond recognition. FRIAR Park's survival, due to Harrison's intervention, makes it an increasingly rare example of Victorian garden making at its most ambitious and imaginative, preserved for future generations not through institutional conservation, but through the passion of an individual willing to invest his resources in a historical property.